So, finally, this is my playthrough of Sid Meier's Silent Service from 1985. This is the original version. So by Sid Meier, IBM version by Randall Don Bastler, artwork by Michael Hare, or Haar. It depends on how you pronounce that name, actually. You can operate it with the joystick or the keyboard. I find the joystick provides very little advantage, because most of the movements of your commander can be done with the function keys, actually, more quickly than with the joystick. You could steer the sub, sort of, but the arrow keys are still easier. So I'm going through the menus here. The Submariner's Hall of Fame is empty because I just installed this. Torpedo and gun practice to avoid moral ambiguities here in wargaming. And it's also easier to do a playthrough. I'm going to eliminate the convoy zigzags because these theoretically are dead scrap ships. So we'll go to the map view here with function 1. And the little red dot is my submarine. The 4 white dots are the scrap ships. So here I'm diving the boat to periscope depth. So you use the down arrow to dive and the return key to hold it. And as you can see, it's running much, much faster than what is realistic, because it's running at 4 times real-life speed, which is the default setting for Silent Service, at least in the original version. So I hit the P key to raise the periscope, because that has to be a separate procedure. Then the F3 key to go to the periscope. I got to the gauges earlier by using F4. So left and right arrows to steer. I'm steering the sub towards the first target. And once I get it lined up, the T key will be to fire the torpedo. The bow torpedo. You could use the stern torpedoes by spinning the periscope around to point back, but of course you have to have your target there. So 1 torpedo was all it took for that target ship. Then I steer to this one. Again, note the extremely fast speed here. This is because of the speed being quadrupled. This is not realistic, really. But I'm using the defaults for the most part in this playthrough. This is a little bit tricky because I'm not at a perfect angle to attack here. But once I get it lined up, I'll hit the T and attempt to fire the torpedo. So that looks like it might miss. Let's see if it does. And it does not. And it sinks the target immediately. So then I check the map to find the other 2. F1. And I go back to F3 for the periscope. I try to line up with this one. It's finally centered. Fire the torpedo. It hits, but the ship doesn't go down, so I fire again. It's a dud torpedo, which is reasonably realistic for the time period. And fire a 3rd time, and then the ship finally goes down. So then I have to steer to the 4th and final scrap ship. Here I'm using the map view rather than the periscope or other view. I still have to line it up a little bit with the left rudder. And then it's difficult to line this one up apparently, but I attempt to fire a torpedo at it. It hits, but the ship doesn't go down. So then I try another shot. Oh, I have a lot of trouble lining up here. Another hit, but it still doesn't go down. So then I'm out of torpedoes. So I do something that you probably should have done back in the day. I dive the ship, or the boat rather, to the bottom to hold it there until it can reload. The reason you wouldn't want to do this, of course, is that by now the destroyers would know exactly where you are, and if you don't move, they'll come right over and depth charge you. But there are no destroyers in this scenario, so it's just a place to hold the sub until the tubes are reloaded. Notice I've also pulled the sub to a stop, so it doesn't scrape on the bottom. You control your throttles with the 1, 2, 3, and 4 keys, and you can cut your throttle off with the 0 key. So now the sub is on the bottom, and we can wait for those torpedo tubes to reload. Which should be pretty fast, because the time scale is ridiculously fast. But I sat here waiting, and I still got impatient, because I'm trying to do a YouTube video. So I sit here, I look at the different gauges there, waiting. The clock doesn't include minutes, incidentally. So I went to the damage report screen to show it off. This is accessed with F5, and it shows R27, or SS-104. Now, R27 wasn't used in World War II because it was scrapped in 1930, 5 years after being pulled from service. So it only had a service life from the year after World War I, 1919, until 1925, and never did anything but training missions. It's confusing because the Navy's modern hull number system was introduced in 1920, so SS-104 was a later number. This is the log showing the ship sunk with F6. And I'm back to the main interior view with the space bar. I go back to the gauges with F4. I have I don't know why I'm sitting there. Maybe I'll cut this out later. Okay, I check the gauges and there's no torpedo ready yet, which is a bit irritating. There it is. Let's see if one does it. So F3 for the scope. But before I can do that, I have to bring the sub to periscope depth. So the up arrow, and once you reach your desired depth, you hit return to hold it. You do the same thing with the rudders, incidentally. So periscope depth, hit return, then F3 for the scope, after raising the scope manually with the P key. So there's the scope, and I'll hit the T key, and it looks like it's going to miss, actually, even though the crosshairs are just fine, but it doesn't. So the ship goes down, and the scenario is over. It shows me the log and the final score, which is based on your Navy ranks, essentially. So they ask you to enter your name if you made the high score list, which I did because there's nothing on the list. And hit return or fire to continue. And there I am, the only score on the list. So that's it. Thanks for watching. I will also do a playthrough, if possible, of the Nintendo Entertainment System version of this simulator. So I will see you in that video.